Chapter 196. It was time to look at Astana, who began to drink in earnest with happy eyes. Every time Astana moved, I saw 4 people following him. They were knights of the Imperial Knights. In addition, the other knights were seen standing guard fully armed throughout the outdoor banquet hall. As expected, I looked at them and snorted slightly. It was because the prey I was aiming for today was the Empress and those Imperial Knights. I also put Lombardy Knights throughout the banquet hall and put them next to Astana. Then, as if they were not going to lose, they guarded the area around the banquet hall and began to follow Astana and guard him. My prediction was right. The Imperial Knights and Lombardy Knights were kind of rival. This was because there were no ordinary noble families, knight comparable to the Imperial Knights, and the Imperial Knights' capacity was decreasing. Some even said that it was caused by the imperial swordsmanship that the Imperial Knights trained. They said that there is a problem with the swordsmanship itself, which limits the scope of the knights. However, many of them also criticized the Imperial Knights' lack of competence. All started when the Brown family was ousted. The reason is the absence of the Brown family, which has served as the commander of the Imperial Knights from generation to generation. Whatever the reason, the fact that the Imperial Knights faced an unprecedented crisis was a fact that everyone agreed. So, everyone's in desperate need. Naturally, those who hold the sword won't want to be strong. I smiled as I looked at the Imperial Knights guarding Astana. Tia, are you here? Without looking back, I could see that it was Perez who came up behind me. You look good in your clothes. I looked at the red clothes Perez wore and said, Of course, you picked it for me. That's true. I laughed as I took the little dust off Perez's clothes. The clothes you wear for today's banquet are red, and the protective gear you wear from tomorrow is red. As I humbly said, Perez smiled, slightly folding his eyes. Don't you think things are going very well anyway? As if fate is on our side, his Majesty suddenly appears to be participating in a hunting contest, and Astana, me and Perez looked at Astana in the distance at the same time. I gave him the wine, Kaloga. In front of Astana, whose eyes were slightly loosened, there were already several empty glasses. As expected, you are destined to achieve what you want, Perez. Revenge and ascent to the throne. Perez, who I thought he would counterattack with light words, was silent. When I turned away, he looked at me with strange eyes. Why do you look at me like that? Tia, sometimes you're weird. Weird? Sometimes you talk like you know the future. He has a good hunch. Is that so? I sneak away from his gaze and blur my words. And one thing is wrong, Perez said. Thanks to you, not me. Thanks to Tia, I'm here now. His red eyes caught me. Then he approached slowly and kissed my cheek. It was an expression full of affection. I could feel the attention of the people around us, but Perez looked at me as if he didn't know such a thing. You're not avoiding it, because people are watching. Is that really why? Perez's voice was full of laughter. Think as you please. When I answered slightly bashfully, Perez now smiled lowly. Then Ramona's figure came into my sight. Here you are, I said, taking a half step back. Perez turned his head and looked at Ramona. You look great in knight's uniform, Ramona. Thank you, Your Highness, the prince. Ramona replied with a slightly shy smile, and looked at me and said, I've never worn such a nice knight's uniform. Thank you, Lady Lombardi. Don't mention it. And you can call me comfortably. There's not much age difference. No, Ramona shook her head and said, How can I do that to the Lady Lombardi? Ramona seemed to have a lot of depth to me. Well, it can't be helped. It's also rude to force someone to talk to someone who doesn't want to. I sighed softly and said to Perez, You go now, Perez, if you're next to me. Astana's gonna be avoiding me. Perez, who understood my half-swallowed words, nodded briefly and took my hand and kissed the back of my hand. Call me if you need me. I'll be around. Okay, go ahead and do your work. I waved my hand at Perez, moving away, and checked Ramona. Ramona was not paying much attention to Perez's behavior, only checking her outfit with a nervous face. Are you ready, Ramona? Yes, Lady Lombardi. Ramona quickly answered my question. I hope you have polished the black well. Ramona smiled slightly as I spoke half-jokingly. Oh, it looks like Lord Brown has arrived, I said when I saw people rushing to one side of the banquet hall, one by one after hearing something. Let's go too. I took the lead first and said, You can't miss a good view, can you? I really want to see the embarrassed Empress face. I'll see it in the front row. Me and Ramona walked halfway to the crowd. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Oh, come on. Astana looked at Belsac and shouted annoyedly. His face was already flushed with alcohol. Get out of here. Astana raised his voice as Belsac and other aristocrats' sons and daughters gathered by his side. Annoying guys. To others, they were called the close aide of the first prince, but to Astana, they were nothing more or less like insects flying around his ears. However, no matter how irritable he was, they only hesitated, and Astana ended up taking another sip of his solo while watching them, who did not intend to back down. As the alcohol came off, the irritation that filled his head seemed to go away a little. Things like parasites. Astana murmured, wiping off the alcohol from his mouth with his sleeve. Things he set up to get when he became emperor. No one was offended, even though his murmur could have been heard. It was because they were used to Astana's mistreatment. It's annoying anyway. Don't stick to me and get away, Astana said, and pushing Belsac on the shoulder. Then a blurry, unfocused eye touched a black forest in the distance. At night, the ever-dense foggy forest of madmen sounded spooky in the wind. Gulp. Astana swallowed his saliva in tension. He never thought it was a hunting contest like this. If he had known before, he wouldn't have bluffed to Perez. Balzac, you should have been told in advance that this Lombardy hunting competition is something like this. Astana was furious with Balzac, who was beside him. Well, I didn't know either. You're useless. He came all the way with the Emperor. In addition, there were so many people that could not imagine it, it, it as a hunting competition. If he loses here, there won't be anything humiliated than this. In addition, it was already been heard among the nobles that there is a bet between the first prince and the second prince, which one will win. This is so unfair. Astan had a cheeky tongue. That lowly guy is the sword master who can deal with aura, but I can't believe he's competing with me. Already in Astan's mind, the fact that he had first made the arguments was neatly erased. Bring me more drinks, Astana shouted to Belsac. Yes, your highness. It was only when Belsac had just turned to call the servants, answering so. What's going on? One of Astana's aides tilted his head. Astana also lifted his dimly unfocused eyes and looked at the crowd. What's all the fuss? What caught Astana's eye was some aristocrats covering their mouths with their hands and being greatly surprised. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Who is it? Someone you want to introduce? Emperor Juvains asked Lulak. It was a face full of curiosity. Lulak suggested to Juvains, who was talking in the back room like any banquet. He said, I have someone to introduce to you, so let's go outside for a while. Then, even when asked to just call him inside, Lulak only gave a blunt answer, saying, There are several people. As he walked toward the center of the banquet hall under Lulak's guidance, the curiosity of Emperor Jovains grew, and it was in the middle of an outdoor space where Lulak finally stopped walking. It was also a place where many ladies and gentlemen were already seated and drinking wine and talking. Your Majesty, Empress Probini also approached and wondered, How did you come out again? Because the Lord of Lombardy said he had someone to introduce. Oh, there he is, Lulak said with a big smile. Naturally, the eyes of Emperor Jovains were directed that way. They are, Jovains squinted. It was a group of men coming this way. They were not familiar faces. However, an indescribable feeling fell on Jovain's back. The face of a middle-aged man at the forefront was strangely familiar. It was also impressive to see him walk proudly. And as they grew closer, one thing in common came into view. Everyone doesn't have a right hand. Emperor Jovains muttered unknowingly. He could tell at the moment their identity. The Brown family. End of chapter 196. Chapter 197. Greetings, Your Majesty. I'm Gilliard Brown, the householder of the Brown family. At last, Emperor Jovain's eyes narrowed as he looked at Gilliard Brown standing in front of him, and the laughter that was full of everything disappeared. The Lord of Brown's face hardened at a sound with a long tail, whose meaning was unknown. He didn't think the Emperor would greet the Brown's return with both hands, but he didn't even know he would be so indifferent. The responsibility for what happened to the Brown family is also in the royal family, so he expected him to look somewhat agitated. Yeah, I think I remember your face. That was the response of Emperor Jovains. Embarrassed, Gilliard Brown cringed habitually, but at that moment he remembered what Florentia said. Always raise your head, straighten your shoulders, and now you're a householder worthy of the name of the Brown family name. The words of the Brown family's name make the head of the Lord of Brown raised again. It wasn't until then it was seen, behind the indifferent Emperor's face. Empress Rabini turned pale. What the hell is this? A voice that seemed to have been strangling someone came from Empress Rabini. It was 10 years ago that she missed the track of Gilliard Brown, son of the predecessor Brown family's householder. But the last time she pursued them, Gilliard Brown was dying from a long chronic illness, and he had no sons and only daughters. So she thought it wouldn't be a big threat, and she didn't chase them anymore. Has he been hiding in Lombardy until now? Empress Rubina's eyes reached Lulak Lombardy with a relaxed face. She can't stand being beaten. She had to do anything to prevent this situation. Empress Rabini chose to attack. Are you sure this Lord Brown, Your Majesty? Well, it was a long time ago. Just looking alike doesn't prove anything. There is nothing left of the Brown family at present. It was because Aunt Janus burned everything. The idea was that there could be nothing identifiable to the Brown family, who were attacked in the middle of the night and everything burned down. Let him show you that, Lord of Brown, then Lulak said to Gilliard Brown as if he had waited. Look at this, Your Majesty. Lord of Brown pulled something wrapped in a soft cloth from his arms and handed it to the Emperor Jovains. This is the ring that my father received from His Majesty the Emperor during his lifetime. A thick golden ring was carved with a vivid imperial design. Inside the ring, the name of the predecessor Lord of Brown was also engraved. When he had been serving as the commander of Imperial Knight for 10 years, he was told that it was an object given by His Majesty the Emperor. The faces of several Imperial Knights who were escorting Emperor Jovanes became visibly gloomy. It was because there were no Imperial Knights who did not know the story of the Lord of Brown, who has devoted his whole life to the Imperial family, but was eventually betrayed by the Emperor. Have you cleared up your doubts now, Empress? Lulak Lombardi gently asked Rabini. The Empress was forced to nod, but she did not take her eyes off the ring that Jovanes was holding. It was a face that clearly showed the desire to take it away and get rid of it. Then the Lord of Brown slowly knelt before the Emperor. He was followed by a dozen or so members of the Brown family. Our Brown family has been chased by unidentified men, Your Majesty. We eventually split up to survive, changing our names, hiding our tracks. Gilliard Brown said in a nonchalant voice, but with the help of Lord of Lombardy, I decided to venture out. And now that I'm able to kneel before His Majesty as the Lord of Brown, there is no room for regrets. At the desperate words, the nobles shook their heads and covered their mouths. The Imperial Knights also had gloomy faces. Although my right hand was stolen, I kept my loyalty intact. It was the moment when the nobles also saw the empty right-handed sleeves of the men of the Brown family. Gasp. Oh my God, it's also cruel. Several reactions have erupted simultaneously, and they were all looking sideways at the Empress. Everyone knows that Anjanus is the only one who would do such a terrible thing to the Brown family. The Brown family and the Lombardi family have a long relationship, Lulak Lombardi said, loosening the tense atmosphere a little. These are the people who have gone through a lot. Now, Your Majesty will end their suffering, so that they no longer have to be chased by fear. How am I supposed to end this? Emperor Jovanes frowned and asked. He looked very annoying. Wouldn't it be nice if you help put the name of the Brown family back on the noble list? It's just that the family has disappeared due to an incident of injustice, and their descendants are continuing their lives like this. I think it is fair to help them that way. However, a strong response came from Empress Rabini. No way, Your Majesty. Grabbing the hem of the dress, Empress Rabini strode up and looked down at the Lord of Brown. For whatever reason, it is a family that once disappeared from the aristocratic register. In other words, they are just commoners now. There was contempt in Rabini's eyes for Gilliard Brown looking up at her. How easy should it be to a nobleman again? It's against equity. It's also a matter of trust in the aristocracy. Trust? Lulak smiled in vain. Did you just say trust, Empress? Even the honorifics, which were given as a courtesy at the official ceremony, had long since disappeared. Yes, the Lord of Lombardy. Oh my God, I can't believe you're talking about trust. I'm sure the Empress doesn't know exactly what happened to her predecessor, or how the Browns got to this point. If she had known, she wouldn't have mentioned trust so easily. Empress Rabini's body winces greatly. Still, she couldn't argue, because Lulak was right. Rabini only knows that Anjanus has taken everything from the Brown family and liquidated the survivors. She didn't know exactly how it happened. It was because, in order to leave no evidence, all relevant records were destroyed, even if it is the record of Anjanus. But I know, Lulak said with a significant smile. It's very useful to be old at times like this. The memories that I saw and heard with my own eyes remain clear. Unlike his expression, he had cold eyes with no laughter. Originally, Lulak had no intention of stepping up to the plate, as much as he entrusted everything to his granddaughter Tia. He thought to step back and watch her. But a few days ago, he heard that assassins sent by the Empress almost harmed Tia in Lombardy's territory, and everything has changed. Lulak looked at Emperor Jovanes and said, I, Lulak Lombardy, will guarantee the identity of Lord of Brown, and the Brown family. It wasn't an easy word to pass. It was as if Lulak announced that Lombardy was behind the Browns. It meant that he would also take responsibility for what the Brown family did. It was also said that if the Browns were touched, they would have touched Lombardy too. How dare you touch my granddaughter? Lulak stared at Rabini Anjanus. He himself seemed to have endured the irritation of Anjanus for a long time. If it's annoying, just remove it from his eyes. It's simple. He'll make the Empress regret for messing with Tia. Lulak smiled cruelly at Empress Rabini. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The Eve banquet became noisier. Everyone was busy commenting on what happened a little while ago about the Browns and the Anjanus families. The Empress eventually left the banquet. The word that Empress Rabini stumbled on the way up to a room prepared for her in the villa quickly became rumors and entered my ears as well. Gosh, damn it, Astana returned to his original seat, where he was sitting and drinking. Bring me more liquor, Balzac. He was angry, with a loud voice to Balzac, who was standing next to him. If the Empress weren't here, he would have stopped him. Your Highness, that's enough. Noisy, get me the liquor. The Imperial Knights who were guarding him pretended to stop him a few times, but Astana, who was drunk, was stubborn. It's time for him to cool down. Follow me, Lady Brown. I approached Astana with Ramona, standing in the way of the servant who was about to take Kaloga wine. Now stop, your highness the first prince. What? I won't give you any more drinks. How would he react if I refused to give alcohol to a drunk dog? How dare you disobey my orders now? Of course, it barks, as if he'd bite me right now. You don't want to waste your money on Kaloga liquor. It's pathetic that Lombardi's guest service is only this much. I spoke in a calm voice to Astana, who was clamoring for more alcohol. If it is money, there is more than enough to leave the world. But it is for your highness. You have to think of the empress. Yeah, you see the empress, don't you? Astana's eyes turned ugly all at once, contrary to my expectations. What? The empress must be very worried about what happened a while ago. It must be very hurtful if the first prince is drunk and shows his bad side to the nobles. You are drunk. Your drunk is the most disliked word for drunken people. Sure enough, Astana shouted like a fit. I'm not drunk, and how do you know my mother's heart? My head went blank for a moment, although he was deliberately drinking and scratching my nerves. Hey, you're amazing. It's just a slip of tongue. Why did you suddenly become silent? It seems like you missed your lowly mother in another world, right? I don't need to respond anymore. Astana just crossed the line. This can be seen by looking at the Imperial Knights and Lombardy Knights who couldn't say anything with their eyes wide open. But the difference between the two is that the Lombardy Knights have their hands on their waist deep swords. Woo! I quietly took off the gloves I had on my hands, suppressing the urge to grab Astana's barking hair, and threw it right on Astana's face. Slap! There was a pretty loud sound. Everyone knew what it meant to throw gloves at the opponent. Lady Lombardi, one of the startled Imperial Knights, called me as if to stop me, but I didn't care and stared at Astana and said, I asked the prince for a duel. Astana was seen struggling to understand the situation with his drunken blurred eyes. Duel? Yes, but you're drunk and I'm not a sword holder, so let's set up our own representatives to settle it. And I said, pointing straight at the Imperial Knights who are still dumbfounded, my escort and Imperial Knight would be perfect. End of chapter 197. Chapter 198. A duel, Lady Lombardi. Eventually, an Imperial Knight came out as if trying to stop me. No, that's a good idea. However, Astana, who smiles profusely, quickly got stuck. He looked up and down at Ramona standing next to me. Astana's face, drunk and smiling, was mean. The loser apologizes to the opponent with all sincerity. Yes, that's good. Astana nodded his head without thinking too much about what I said. Sir Sloane, be my agent and have a duel, Astana said, calling the most senior of the four escorts. What? But, Your Highness, the knight called Sloane sweated as he alternated between me and Ramona. A duel for honor should have the same skills as the agents. It wasn't a word of malice. Perhaps that knight Sloane is a man with a pretty high title, so it would be difficult to fight for the honor of the prince against the young lady, who seems to be in her early 20s. I glanced at Ramona. Ramona was uncharacteristically faceless and only looking straight ahead. She seemed very angry. I sneaked a question to such a Ramona. What do you think? They say that. Ramona looked stiffly at Astana and Sir Sloane and said, If you're not ignoring me, proceed to the duel, Sir Sloane. It's absolutely not like that. Sir Sloane, who seemed embarrassed to talk, finally sighed with resignation. Don't let it slide, Sir Sloane. Astana once again whispered to Sir Sloane with a fishy smile. I can hear you, at least. Sir Sloane looked at me with a very uncomfortable face and asked, Are you sure you're all right, Lady Lombardi? Now it's a little annoying. It's good to be considerate, but Sir Sloane's words and actions are nothing but ignoring Ramona. I answered with my arms crossed. What is your exact name and position, Sir Sloane? Yes, I am Edian Sloane, Vice Commander of the Third Knights of the Imperial Family. Oh, I see. I heard the Imperial Knights have been very in-depth training in Imperial swordsmanship, right? Yes, Lady Lombardi. I've been training in Imperial swordsmanship for 15 years since I joined at the age of 20. Quite proud, Sir Sloane replied, tapping his chest. Yes, it said that the more versed in Imperial swordsmanship, the weaker he was in front of Ramona. Sure enough, Ramona's face, which had been hardened, was slightly loosened. Let's proceed. Astana smirked at my words. There was no Kaloga liquor anymore, so he was looking for a glass of wine somewhere and sipping it. Hello, Sir Sloane spoke to Ramona in a polite voice. What's your name? I think I should at least know. Ramona answered, looking straight at Sir Sloane. My name is Ramona Brown. You can call me Lady Brown. It was worth seeing that Sir Sloane's eyes were shaking as if there were earthquakes. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Have you heard? There's going to be a duel. Duel? Yes, I heard it's also His Highness, the First Prince, and Lady Florentia Lombardi. Rumors were spreading rapidly among the nobles. Why all of a sudden? Well, His Highness the First Prince told Lady Lombardi. It was before the aftermath of the Brown family's reappearance after decades. Oh my God, this banquet is the best. What a series of interesting things to happen. The nobles gathered in groups, shouting cheers, and rushed to the place where the duel would take place. Aren't we going to have to go, Your Highness? Pedro asked Perez impatiently because he was too excited. Ramona was a close colleague who spent 6 years together at the academy. He wanted to go there without missing a moment at the scene where such a close friend finally took the first step toward achieving her family's long-cherished wish. That's how it should be. Perez began to take a leisurely step. Soon after, Perez and the trio reached a grassland where people gathered in a circle. When he arrives, people whispered and make their way to the second prince, the fiancé of Florentia Lombardi. They are already ready for a duel, Lignite said with a small whistle. It's not common for a duel to take place on the same day without setting a separate day to decide. It was even rare for a duel to begin immediately without hours of preparation. Your Highness seems to have no intention of stopping it. No, he can't stop it. As such, the insults that the first prince uttered were tremendous. Emperor Jovanes was sitting at the front and watching the duel. Next to him were Lulac Lombardi and Galliahan Lombardi. They were witnesses to a massive duel. He can't get away with it. It was all thoroughly planned, so perhaps it was natural, Lignite murmured quietly as he watched the gathered nobles, the first prince with the confident face, and the two knights facing each other holding the sword. What a scary person is your highness, fiancé. What a piece of work all this is. At the words, Bell slowly looked back at Lignite. It's like saying something obvious. It's Tia. Then he looks at the duel again, with his eyes full of anticipation. His sparkling eyes also contained his affection toward Tia. You two are the same, the same. Lignite shuddered slightly. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It's an honor to face a person of the Brown family with a sword. Sir Sloane looked at Ramona and said softly. It wasn't an empty word. Not only Sir Sloane, but also the knights of the Imperial Knights gathered after hearing the news, all had the same face. Thank you, Ramona replied, trying to hide her complicated feelings. Then Emperor Jovanes rose from his seat with a slightly stiff face. It was a duel that would not benefit Jovanes no matter who won. He felt like he wanted to throw Astana, who had made things like this, somewhere right now. Emperor Jovanes spoke briefly to Ramona and Sir Sloane. If you're ready, start. In the crowd, two knights greeted each other while looking at each other. Swing, swing. Two swords appeared with a cool sound. The nobles, who rarely saw the knight's true duel, concentrated with sweat. Ramona and Sir Sloane began to move slowly, pointing their swords at each other. It was heavy and prudent, as each step could lead directly to victory or defeat. Then, Sir Sloane moved ahead first. It was a movement not to drag the duel long. One step, two step. The distance between the two quickly narrowed as they took a stride. Hoot! With short metal, Sir Sloane swung his sword at Ramona. It was a simple, yet seasoned perfect dagger. But Sir Sloane's sword was blocked by Ramona's sword, who struck it briefly. Ramona's subsequent attacks were also formidable. Shroop! In an instant, she climbed up Sir Sloane's sword, upside down. The sharp tip of the sword was aimed at Sir Sloane's neck. Tring! Without embarrassment, experienced Sir Sloane unwinded Ramona's sword. It was a technique frequently used in imperial swordsmanship, using the opposing power to move directly from defense to offense. However, an unexpected situation occurred after that. Krang, a sharp metal tone rang, and Ramona's sword was once again threatening. Ho! Sir Sloane swallowed his breath and leaned back. Thanks to this, he was able to cut off Ramona's offensive, but there were deep wrinkles between his brows. He couldn't understand. He's sure his technique worked. Ramona's sword moved in a moment as if ignoring the flow. Huh? The same reaction came from the Imperial Knights watching the duel. There's something just. All the sword-handling nobles who attended the eve showed the same appearance. Surely, Sir Sloane was the dominant duel, and Ramona's sword quickly turned it over. Ha! As soon as Sir Sloane found the center of his body, he attacked again. Clang, clang, clang. The sound of two swords striking was fierce. Ramona, in particular, clenched her teeth against Sir Sloane's heavy sword. However, the difference between physical strength and age was inevitable. Ramona began to push back little by little. Ah, sad exclamations were heard everywhere. At the same time, a fishy smile spread over Astana's face. He foresaw his victory. End of chapter 198. Chapter 199. Hoot. Perhaps Sir Sloane had the same idea, but he quickly began to launch an offensive. Tuck, tuck. With a cheerful sound, Sir Sloane's large body quickly stepped on the footsteps. It was a standard movement that was faithful to the basics but without unnecessary things. It was an achievement as the vice commander of the Imperial Knights. Sir Sloane was threatening to cut down Ramona at any moment. However, another strange thing happened. Oh, Ramona began to spread her distance at the same time, and the two men's steps were as if they were mirrored. Well, what's that? Someone shouted in astonishment. It wasn't simply rewinding the steps in reverse. Ramona's step was the same as that of Sir Sloane, but it was also different. It was more sophisticated and more mature. And tuck, clung. Everything happened in an instant. Ramona's eyes seemed to change sharply, and just a moment ago, he used Sir Sloane's draining technique. But this time it was different. Exactly. The defensive turned into offense half as quickly as Sir Sloane looked. Woo! There seemed to be a strong wind blowing along the path. Ha! Suddenly, Ramona's sword was stopped in front of Sir Sloane's neck. Sir Sloane, who blinked twice, said after looking briefly at Ramona's sword blade reflecting the light of the banquet hall, Lose, I lost. Wow, amazing, what awesome. Cheers erupted from all sides. Clap, clap, clap. Applause poured out. Imperial Knights also forgot that their superiors had lost and looked at Ramona blankly with round eyes. Who the hell is that knight? The escort of Lady Lombardy. It must be Lombardy's knight. Anyway, it's amazing. Everyone had already forgotten that this was a duel for the honor. The one a while ago was, no, all of them. Sir Sloane murmured with a confused face. It was such a strong defeat that it completely made him forget that he lost. Then he asked Ramona with his eyes as strong as fire, How on earth did you do it? It was a question that anyone who had trained with the sword was asking. Ramona's movement was beyond common sense. Teach me, Lady Brown. Sir Sloane approached and said he had not even returned his short breath yet. The knights held their breath, but there was not much expectation. It was because he didn't think that she would tell such a big secret technique in such a public place. The first technique that Sir Sloane first saw was a half-baked, but Ramona opened her mouth in a calm voice. You don't end up with this rotation. You have to pull the sword one more time. That way, the other person's breath, even the kindness shows examples by lifting the sword again. The knights were embarrassed by the appearance, but don't want to miss even a single move, and stepped closer without realizing it. The aristocrats, who were only cheering, felt something strange, and tilted their heads as the situation suddenly changed from a duel to a lecture. Then what happened to the stepping method? Asked the knight who was quietly listening to the lecture. Again, there was no hesitation. Ramona explained in an easy-to-understand manner in a quiet tone. The more so, the more eager the Imperial Knights were to learn. Every word Ramona Brown said was gold. It was blood and flesh advice for knights. Some of them broke through a wall that had been blocked for several months already without progress. A while ago, what exactly is that term half? Sir Sloane asked Ramona, Are you saying that the Imperial swordsmanship we know is incomplete in half? Ramona looked to one side instead of answering. She checked the figure of Florentia smiling in a relaxed chair, as if waiting for the last order. Nod. Florentia nodded slightly. Woo. Ramona, who sighed briefly, said, Yes, the brown swordsmanship which was handed down as the imperial swordsmanship is an incomplete copy, with many parts omitted. Ha! The ancestors of the Brown family, who created the imperial swordsmanship, improved the brown swordsmanship so that a few more people could learn it safely and quickly. In the process, parts that are not essential or difficult to learn were omitted. Ramona's refreshing voice rang in the night air. But from generation to generation, the Brown family has learned an unedited Brown swordsmanship, and based on that, they took on the position of head of the Imperial Knights and taught knights. But, so, people understood at the same time. The reason why the Brown family, who served as the commander of the Imperial Knights, disappeared at the same time, the achievements of Imperial Knights began to fall slowly. A lot of what I know is the result of the hard work that my father and the survivors of the Brown family over the past 40 years. The crowd was in a tumult, and the gaze toward Ramona naturally began to gather on other people. Let me announce the outcome of the duel. It was Emperor Jovanes with a stiff face. As a result of a duel of honor, the representative of Florentia Lombardy won. Cold Jovane's eyes turned to Astana. He was like a pathetic figure sitting with a bright red face, unable to run away because he had a lot of eyes to see. Then Ramona moved. Holding her own sword, she took her steps, and she stood in front of Florentia. Swing. Ramona, who supported the sword with both hands, slowly knelt on one knee in front of Florentia, and spoke solemnly. Ramona Brown, I dedicate my victory and honor to Lady Lombardy. This is a common ritual performed by the representative who has won a duel. But that's Lombardy and Brown. The atmosphere around has become strange. Thank you for fighting bravely, Lady Brown. Florentia Lombardy rose slowly and received Ramona's sword with both hands and spoke to Astana. Now I want you to apologize. Astana's body flinched loudly. An apology for insulting my mother and underestimating Florentia Lombardy's honor. I didn't make up words that I didn't. Astana leaped to his feet and shouted. Until the end, it was an attitude that he didn't do anything wrong. First Prince, however, in front of Javane's cold voice, the momentum was quickly dampened. Well, Astana clenched his fist. What makes him so angry? He stared at the calmly waiting Florentia and said, squeezing, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Although the apology that she had earned after fighting the duel was insignificant, Florentia shrugged her shoulder once. Darn it, Astana, who had been sober with shame, chanted abuse words and left his seat. Hundreds of eyes flew behind Astana's back and pushed his back. It is enough. Emperor Jovanes arose from where he was sitting, saying so, and he asked Ramona, "What's your name again?" "It's Ramona Brown, Your Majesty." Ramona once again knelt down and answered politely. "What's your relationship with the Lord of Brown?" "He's my father." The tail of Jovane's speech became longer, and secretly his eyes turned to her right hand holding the sword. "It's not cut, but with a normal hand. Are you in a hunting contest, Lady Brown?" "Yes, I am not good enough, but I attend in the name of the Brown family, Your Majesty." "Yes, good luck." Jovane turned away, leaving only that word. There was no mention of a higher level sword, as Ramona showed a moment ago. Ramona's shoulders drooped down a little. However, the Imperial Knights following the Emperor's Guard knight looked back at Ramona. Their eyes were full of lingering feelings. There was a gentle grip on Ramona's shoulders, standing in such a slowly dispersed crowd. "Lady Lombardi, don't worry, Lady Brown. The Brown family swordsman return has been and overcome the first step." Tia smiled, her green eyes sparkling lively. "Trust me." It was a strange thing. With just that word and a smile, Ramona's heart soared. It was really reassuring. Ramona didn't know if she knew how she felt. "Astana, your stupid face is embarrassing." Tia had some sort of villainous laugh. "Chase, Chase." Her shoulders shook as if they were dancing as she spoke words whose meaning was unknown. End of chapter 199. Chapter 200. The next morning, since it is the day of the hunting competition to begin, the Lombardi villa has been busy from early in the morning. This was because the employees were up and busy before dawn, and among them were those who came out of the palace following the empress. Many of the luggage that she had brought with the schedule to stay throughout the hunting contest was being arranged in the hands of the servants again. The blasphemy. The Empress, who was sitting on the sofa with a poor face because she couldn't sleep, muttered one after another. "How dare you insult me like that?" Last night, the face of the old Lombardi who brought Brown's men and smiled triumphantly came to her mind, so she couldn't get rid of it. The Empress pushed her carefully arranged nail tips into the armchair covered leather. Things like dumb bags that never die. She meant the Brown family. Since that day, more than 40 years ago, Angenes had used a lot of manpower, time, and resources to clean up the Brown family. They tracked down those who did not have a right hand and killed them if they lived a stable life, and kept them alive if they lived a shabby life. But then they got together and started planning like that. I should I should have killed them all on the spot yesterday. The Emperor's blue eyes shone cruelly. The land where Angenes is now located was a place to live and build a home in the barren west. It couldn't be taken back by the weak Brown who couldn't even protect their land. No need to worry about the Brown family anymore. It was a matter of sweeping them away again secretly. However, an annoying old man, Lulak Lombardi, was not a pushover. It was the Lord of Lombardy that used to shove a knife in his back as suddenly as this time, even if he was on the lookout. It's obvious that the Empress doesn't know exactly what happened to her ancestors or how the Brown family came to this point. He wasn't talking about the raid. There's no one in the Empire who doesn't know about what happened that night. Lulak must be talking about the way the Browns lost their land. Luigi. At Rabini's call, the Lord of Longenas, who was checking his luggage in the next room, approached. "Do you happen to know anything about the Brown family, Luigi? When it comes to land, you know that our father was particularly reticent about it." "Yes, he did, but I asked you because I thought you had something to say." Empress Rabini spoke with disappointment. "Not a very helpful father. It's the same after his death." Empress Rabini uttered harsh words with a casual face. "I have to go back and meet the elder of Angenes. It won't work like this." Lulak's smiling face was ominous. Rabini was constantly bothered by a feeling of uneasiness. It was clear that those who experienced what happened around that time would know something. "Mother." Then Astana came into the room. "Where are you going?" "Ah, Prince, your mother will go back to the palace because something urgent came up." The prince enjoy the hunting contest and come back. Astana squirmed at the smiling face of Empress Rabini. "What happened yesterday? Aren't you angry?" He thought he'd get in big trouble. As soon as she saw his face, her usual gentle smile was rather scary. "Yes, there was a commotion yesterday, right?" Empress Rabini looked at Astana and asked. Now that it has come, Astana was in a hurry to make excuses. "I can explain everything." Yesterday, Empress Rabini snapped Astana's words. "Let's say that we both played in Lombardi's hands yesterday, Prince." "Yes, what does that mean?" "We are played in Lombardi's hands." Astana was puzzled. I insulted Lady Lombardi, whom I first started it." "Ah, my son." Empress Rabini patted her son's cheek. It was obviously a conflict with Florentia Lombardi that caused the duel yesterday. However, the person who duels instead of there is a member of the Brown family, so everyone at that place witnesses the excellence of Brown's swordsmanship. There is no such perfect coincidence. Rabini was convinced the situation itself was plotted. Last time, she thought Florentia was clever when she suddenly called Paris at the Empress's palace dinner. She never thought she'd do such a cute thing. Empress Rabini smiled benevolently at Astana, who still looked at her with his eyes wide open. I need to know anything. Leave it to your mother. I'll put you on the throne by all means. It was a sweet voice like the honey of a rose with thorns. Well then, mother. Astana hesitated and said, what if I went back to the palace with you? What if I get seriously hurt after participating in this ignorant contest? So, no, Empress Rabini cut firmly and said, if the prince is weak at a time like this, we can all be ridiculed. But, Astana cried, as it happened yesterday, he woke up in the morning and looked out of the window, and the foggy forest of madmen was so shabby. Before hunting competitions, his heart thumped with fear. It's a contest that His Majesty will attend. If the prince gives up and goes back to the capital, everyone will be misunderstood that you run away because you were afraid. Isn't that so? It's scary. However, Astana touched his lips a few times with his pale face, and he reluctantly nodded his head. Prince, move with other aristocratic sons, then everything will be fine. Empress Rabini got up from her seat to go for the courage after she said so. However, Astana continued to glance through the dark forest of madmen, who didn't have a good sense of honor. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Finally, it's time for the hunting contest to begin. I was on the podium in front of the participants gathered in one place. It was to explain the rules of the hunting competition, and the moment I stood on the podium, gulp, I had to keep my mouth shut in order not to laugh. Let me briefly tell you the rules of the competition. It was because it was worth seeing that most of the participants' faces were in tears. Of course, some people flashed their eyes and burned the spirit of victory. The rules are simple. The person who dealt with the greatest monsters in the next 3 days will get the honor of winning and the prize money. As evidence, you can cut off a part of the corpse of the monster and collect it. When I asked to cut it off, I could already see some distorting their faces because they're not feeling well. Let's tease them a little more. But remember, monsters are also creatures who know how to hunt people. So don't go too deep in the woods and use the provided flair when you are in a dangerous situation. I saw people who were more contemplated by my words quickly looking at the signal. Be careful because the flares become useless when it's wet, and if you use flares, you will be disqualified in the competition at that moment. Then Astana, wearing yellow protective gear, suddenly asked, it's an individual game, but it's an acknowledgement of getting help from someone else in a dangerous situation, right? He's using his brain. I already knew that dozens of people who participated in the event were Astana's aides. That's why he's going to get a definite answer and work in groups in there. Yes, but as you said, it's an individual competition, so you have to refrain from excessive cooperation. Of course, the prince wouldn't do such a thing, right? Astana nodded quiveringly at my question. However, he seemed to be more relieved to exchange glances with the henchman next to him. Do you have any more questions? I asked the participants. No one raised their hands. Then let's start a hunting contest. Lombardi servants flapped large flags at my words. The hunting competition was officially begun. Has officially begun. I could see some people running into the forest as if they had waited. In reality, they were bored, and it seemed that they were too excited to take this opportunity. They have the shortest lives. It was when I murmured as I watched the running back. Perez was seen approaching Astana with the Academy trio. I couldn't hear them because it was too far away, but there's no way that words of blessing come and go between the two. Sure enough, when Perez said something with a few words, Astana's face turned pale, and he rushes to the woods with his people, as if he were running away. What did you say? I approached Perez and asked. Tia. Perez smiled slightly, folding his eyes toward me. Did you by any chance give him a notice of murder? No, it's not like that. Just, Perez replied, shaking his head. I said he'd better not go into the woods and run into me. Wow, that's cruel. If it's not a murder notice, what it is? What is it? Perez tilts his head on my face, looking at him, covering my mouth with one hand. Tia, I told you that yesterday, so you should have been prepared for that. Well, yeah, thank you, Perez. That's a horrible way to do me a favor. I'll be back then. Perez came up to me saying so, and he kissed my forehead as if he was used to it. Okay, have a safe trip, I said, brushing off his red protective gear that Perez is wearing, and I made eye contact with the Academy trio. I'll be back. Oh, my waist. Why is it like this today? Good work. I think they're avoiding my eyes. What's wrong with them? Lady Florentia, it was Clarivan who appeared quietly, calling to me after Perez. What on earth is going to happen in there? Yeah, it's worth your while to be curious about. I don't know either. What? That's all what Perez and I cooperated with. He will have a hunting contest in the forest of madmen. Stamp Lord Brown's eye and have Astana and the Emperor participate. You really don't know? Clarivan said in a dazed way, because it is. If Lady Florentia had asked, I think the prince would have answered anything. That's right, but why didn't you ask? Because, I replied, looking again at the thick foggy dark forest. I and Perez were people who have to do whatever we want to do. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It was such a strange thing. Quite a few people entered the forest, but in the foggy forest it was only silence, as if the forest of madmen had eaten up the sound of people. The magic is amazing. This is why the monsters live together. Tedros said. The noble family participants must be breaking out in a cold sweat. Steely giggled. Are you not a noble then? Lignite son of the Eastern Lumen family asked with a frown. Don't compare me with a bunch of guys like that. I am the successor of the Sector family, who learns to hunt while traveling through the southern jungle from an early age. Steely shrugged his shoulders. Then Perez, who had his feet on a thick tree, and was tying his shoelaces tightly, called him. Steely. Yes, Your Highness. Tracking. Is that possible? Steely replied with a grin at Perez's words. That's enough. Steely's specialty, the successor to a sector family moving in and out of the southern jungle like a front yard, was the tracking of hunting trails. End of chapter 200.